books and blockchain literary NFTs in 2023. And I'm happy to introduce Edward Carpenter, Greg Younger, Rionna Morgan, and CD Damitio.
There we go. I think this is on now. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Edward Carpenter, and I got involved in NFTs back 2021. I had heard about them for a long time. It didn't really seem like something I was into. I was a writer, and it didn't make sense to me until I kind of wondered, wait a minute, the NFTs I'm hearing people like Tim Ferriss talk about are artwork, and writing is a form of art. So maybe I should be thinking about, how my art form translates to this new media. And I got into it at a really interesting time. So my first NFT, looking for Karsten in the crowd, was Creatokia's Create Token, which was this little thing that would give me the right at some future date to publish a book with a big German publishing company. And then the next thing I bought was it was a page DAO, like a token to use the page DAO minter. And the third thing was one of 829 copies of Neil Strauss's Project One, which was one of the first big books to, a New York Times bestseller on the blockchain. Kind of made news. And that was 2022 in a nutshell. It started with that book by Neil in January, and it ended with Tim Ferriss's Cock Punch series, which again doesn't look like a book, right? It's a PFP. But if you have the PFP, you get to listen to his audio book that he is narrating in a episodic, serialized basis, and it's formed this really massive community. So very successful projects, and in between, there have been a lot of books and poetry that you haven't heard about, because the thing says books in the blockchain, but also says literary NFTs, because what I discovered in the course of the last year, was anything that you can think of as literature could be NFTs. And I have just recently discovered poetry. And we got some poets in the crowd. And that is one. Graphic novels lends itself very well. And we're going to hear about how this technology can actually help us do things that we couldn't do other ways. So with me on the stage today is Rionna Morgan. She has come from being very successful in publishing traditionally with Simon & Schuster. She's pivoted almost entirely into Web3. CD Damitio is the publisher and editor of the first and the only continuing magazine on Web3, published on Ethereum. Time magazine released one issue with Vitalik Buterin on the cover. That was a big deal in 2022. But CD has been publishing every month, I think, since late 2021, right?
Yeah, we're up to 14 issues now.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, I've actually advertised in his magazine. So everything you can do in the real world, you can also do in the literary world on Web3. And then we have Greg Younger, who's kind of the father of the Write3 hashtag, which is because there's writing about Web3, and then there's publishing on Web3, and a lot of the same people doing the same stuff. So I think you have a pretty interesting panel here today. And I think maybe, Rionna, you could start off by telling us what's in it for writers.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rionna Morgan. I am going to chat with you a little bit about why I've transitioned fully from being a Web 2 writer to a Web 3 writer. So I've been a writer a very long time, and I have, like Edward said, I have works published with Simon & Schuster. And in my transition from being a Web 2 writer, where you work on a book and then you set about deciding, does it fit the market? Did I miss the vampire craze? And then you look at agents and publishers and you try to convince them, hey, look at me, this is great, please pick me and publish my book out there. In Web 3, that is not the case. It is completely flipped over. There are so many opportunities. If I were to say, let me describe Web3 publishing, Web3 writing in one word, I would say opportunity. And if I would use it in a phrase, I would say endless opportunities. There's so many things to do. So first off, to talk about some things that I have done, so that if you are deciding, do I want to join the Web3 writer group? Do I want to join the Write3 people? So this is an idea of what you can do, because this is what I have done. So there's a current project that I'm working on through a company called Storyverse, and they are bringing like comic books to life. And so I actually, as a Web3 writer, have an opportunity to write for 5 different Bored Ape characters. I get to write their story, talk about a mystery. It's called Chasing Shadows. And we get to spend time, and I actually write for Von Doom's Bored Ape. And so that's so exciting. And that's just one piece. Another piece you can publish yourself. I have a project called The 7 Love Stories that I minted on Manifold. Or you can choose to work with other Web3 publishers. People like SoulType, PageDAO, Readle, Kritokia. And so there's so many things, so many amazing opportunities to experience and look at. And so I'm going to pass it to CD so that he can talk to you about the kinds of things that are available for readers and the benefits for readers in the space. Thank you.
Good afternoon and aloha, everybody. So they say that every great writer starts out as a great reader. And without readers, really, books on the blockchain aren't going to exist at all. So the question is, what can we as writers, as publishers, what can we bring to readers that they're not getting from Web 1, from Web 2, from pre-web? And in the first book that I wrote, it's called Rough Living, and it has a philosophy of sort of like getting by. And I talk about the 3 A's, and I think that these are really appropriate for what we bring to readers, what we can bring to readers. And the 3 A's are abilities, access, and accumulations. So with abilities, you're able to bring your unique writing ability to the blockchain as a writer, but Web3 enables connecting with the readers themselves and allowing the readers to actually become involved with the writer, to have access to the writer, to have access to publishers, have access to rock stars. I mean, there's no shortage of people that you can gain access to through Web3 as long as they're publishing here or as long as they're involved in the Web3 process. So then you have the access card, which, oh, this is what I was talking about, access, excuse me, the accumulations. So imagine as a reader, you have a Kindle that's filled with books. It's filled with books, and you're like, oh, my library's so great, but I think I'd like to sell my books. You can't sell your books off a Kindle. Web3 books, you actually can. So readers gain the ability not just to have the book, to read the book, but to own the book, to collect the book, to share the book, to sell the book, and to profit from the book. This is a big deal. So you have the accumulations, the access, and then really you have projects like, I don't know if you guys have heard of Jenkins the Valet, but it says on the back here, we are book people. And indeed we are book people. And what Jenkins pioneered was allowing the community to actually have a chance to tell the story itself. And I feel like that's way, way beyond anything that Web 1 can offer. As a kid, I read Choose Your Own Adventure novels, and this goes beyond Choose Your Own Adventure. It goes, write the adventure for everybody else too. But of course, we have all these things that readers can be excited about, that writers can be excited about, but how does the world learn about them? How do we engage them? Well, one way is through collecting, and the idea of collecting is something that Greg Younger knows a lot about.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for having me up here, Edward. This is a great panel that you've put together here. My name is Greg Younger. I sit at the intersection of writing and Web3. It's a space that I've coined Write3. And I came to it as a collector, first and foremost. And so the interesting thing about books on the blockchain, which is a relatively new concept here, is that there's a lot of benefits for writers, there's a lot of benefits for readers, but what you're gonna find is that there's a lot of people out there who just collect books. I am one of them. I'm a serial collector, and I have more books that I've collected than I'm ever gonna read. That's just the bottom line. But it's a really interesting concept, and we might think, why would people wanna collect your stuff and not read it? And there's actually quite a few reasons. For one, patronage. You'll find in the book NFT world, the Write3 world, there's a lot of people out there who just want to say, hey, thanks for the work that you're doing. Appreciate that you're creating stuff. So let me go collect that and say thank you with my wallet. The second thing is speculation. There's this, in NFTs, there's this concept that, hey, you know what, if I can get in early with a creator, this book might be worth more down the road than it is today. And so, there's a lot of folks out there that will collect for that reason. And then the third reason is this idea of a social graph. So, what we collect is on the public domain, right? So everything that we collect, people can find out. And so, what we're seeing, and I think what we're going to continue to see, is this ability for us to collect things, and then people can see what you're collecting. And then we can be like, hey, you know what? I really like that creator. I like his or her taste in fashion. I like their taste in music. Well, why can't I like their taste in books as well, right? So we're going to want to build our own social graphs to say, hey, this is the stuff that I'm into. If you're interested in being in the same stuff, you can check out what I have. So lots of interesting reasons why you might want to collect. And the last thought I'll add to that is, with books in particular, one of the things that's gone away is this concept of editions. So, anybody who's got an ebook, do you know which version of the ebook you have? Most likely you don't, right? Well, NFT books brings back this concept of editions, especially first editions, right? So you have a minimum run. All of these fantastic authors have written books, and there's a minimum amount that you can collect today. And once those are collected, there's not going to be another version 1, right? And those become collector's items. And so one of the things that excites me about NFT books in particular is that we can get back to this concept of collecting first editions, which we've never been able to do. So tons of awesome stuff in the book NFT world. But one of the things that's really cool is collaborations. And Edward, I know that you just finished a great collaboration with your arts and poetry. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'll be happy to, but I'd like to talk about this idea of collaboration in general. In fact, this panel is a collaboration. When I was looking for a speaking opportunity, one of the things I saw last year, went to a bunch of conferences, nobody was talking about books. Everybody was talking about other things. So I said, well, I got to be the change I want to see in the world. And when I applied, I started doing my own application. And then I said, do you want to nominate another speaker? I'm like, okay, nominated Rionna. And then they're like, do you want to nominate another speaker? And it kept letting me nominate people up to, I think, about 5. So I brought as many people up here as I could, because these are all friends and colleagues and we've collaborated in different ways. When I did my first NFT, I kind of wanted to answer that question that kind of Greg and CD were asking, was like, why should I collect this? If I'm a reader, what's in it for the reader? Okay, I can lump the audiobook in with the thing that you get. That's something the NFT lets me do. But why should I collect this as opposed to that? I will donate 10% to charity, and you can see it on the blockchain. You can see the transactions, and I'll give back 10%. I'll gift back 10% of all my writing earnings at the end of the year. There's lots of cool things I could do for the reader or the collector, but for a community, I was like, I wanted to share more. And the first thing I did was I had a friend who's a really great cover artist. I had a story that I needed cover art for, and in the traditional world, a publisher would try and pay the lowest fixed rate. Like the lady who did the cover for Harry Potter, she probably got $300 for that picture and never a penny cents, because that's the way the real world works. But here I could tell my friend, I'll split this 50-50. I write the short story, you do the art, and we'll see what happens. And then I said, okay, can we take this further? And I found that you could actually, there's a couple of platforms, you could do an infinite way split. So now we have the Arts and Poetry Journal has 20 poets from around the world. There's a guy from Nairobi. There's a lady from Venezuela, another one from Brazil. There's places where 2 pesos means a lot more than it does in America. And it instantly goes to them when someone buys a copy. And it's not that I wouldn't want to do it on Amazon if I could, but there's no way. If I sell a book on Amazon for $10, how am I supposed to send checks for 50 cents to people in 16 different countries overnight? It doesn't work. But the blockchain lets us do that. And so that's one of the things I'm so excited about, is this ability to collaborate.
Someone who's really demonstrated collaboration, I think, in a very real way with books on blockchain is Rionna. She actually literally gave voice to her illustrator. Actually, you should tell this.
Okay, so hello, Rionna Morgan again. And so the project that he's talking about, is the 7 Love Stories, which I'm the author of, and I actually collaborated with 4 illustrators in the Web3 space who I'd never met before. I just spent time on Twitter, yay, and noticed that they really exhibited qualities of care and love, which is what the 7 Love Stories is all about, is leading with love, spreading love. And so I thought, I really want them to be part of this project. I picked out 4 of them. I contacted them. They were like, yes, 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 definitely. And so the end product is a literary NFT, which I give an introduction to. The illustrator themselves get to talk about the cover art and the art that they did. And it's a movie. It's an experience to participate and watch this literary NFT. And so that's the 7 Love Stories. This other piece that I am working on currently that I'm really excited about is through Storyverse, the comic book come to life. And I actually, on a daily basis, get to interact with my readers, my collectors, my would-be collectors, because it's not minted yet. It's not out yet. And so they get to jump in on the Discord or on Twitter and interact with me on LinkedIn and get to say, oh, let's go. It's a murder mystery, and so they're like, go back to the girl's apartment and find out what happened. And so they get to like guide me, and so it's like a in-person live choose your own adventure piece. And so it's phenomenal. I've been a writer a long time. I got my first here's some money in 1988 as a writer, a long darn time ago. And so I've been doing it since then. I've never had so much fun. I've never been so busy. I've never had so much fun. I did not know these people or some of the beautiful, friendly faces in the audience before 2022, 2023. So I am in love with this space, and come join, come visit. And if I don't get to talk again, and I may, but please come see me. I have presents for people who came today. So come see me, come see me. Okay, so let's see, CD. You wanted to talk about.
I'm going to talk about marketing.
Oh, you're going to talk about marketing. You go for it. You go
no
for
worries. So one of the interesting things that we're realizing in the books on the blockchain is that I don't know if it's the amount of mental work that it takes to get your work on the blockchain, or if it's just this feeling of like, I just can't wait to get this thing minted. But there's not always a lot of marketing and sort of, you know, as we've cut out the publisher and taken more control of ourselves and our processes, we need to make sure that in order to be successful with our books, that we're still thinking about publishing and we're still thinking about marketing the works. And one of the things that we're really finding is that even though we're writers, there's nothing more important than the visualization, right? And especially NFTs in 2023, what we're providing to our collectors visually is extraordinarily important. And so it's important that all book creators, all literary NFT folks think about what they're doing from an art perspective, but they also need to have a bit of a strategy. So I have a Discord. I've got all these aspiring writers and authors, and we'll get a lot of people like, I think I'm just going to mint something today. And that's okay if you want to do that, but just minting something sort of out of thin air might not mean much in the world of sales. And if we're here to make money, then we might want to think about having a bit of a strategy. And we can learn a lot from the NFT art world. Artists in this community do an excellent job with drumming up some demand and thinking about drops and creating allow list. And so I think that the book community, the Write3 community, needs to lean into that concept just a little bit. And I think, ultimately use the tools that we have available. There's AI, there's Midjourney, there's Canva, there's all sorts of things. I'm the least artistic person in the world, and I can still slap together some things. So I assure you that if I can do it, you can do it. But having some visualizations there is going to have a big impact on where we go. So that's my take on the marketing. I think what really excites me is what could come next and what books could become. And I know, CD, you got some ideas on that.
I'm super happy to jump in on that. I can't say how important the marketing aspect is. It's so important, and I've learned a ton through Greg, through Write 3, and also through a lot of other people. I think Tim Halderson's here, and you know, there's like a marketing aspect to Web 3 that needs to be embraced, that needs to be utilized. But let's talk about the future of books, because we're at a point where, you know, first there were tablets carved in stone, and then there were scrolls that were like, you know, stretch it out on the stage. If you have a long novel, it's literally long. And now we have books and ebooks, and we've suddenly moved into something else. And I think that we can move into something so extraordinarily different that we're going to have to call it a different name than books, you know? When I was a kid, I was that geek kid sitting in a treehouse reading a book, you know? And I read this book called Ender's Game, Ender's War by Orson Scott Card. Now, in this book, this guy is like, he's involved in a story, and it's sort of metaverse. He jumps into the book, he dives into the giant's eye, and it breaks the game, and suddenly he can do all these things. That's what I think we're heading towards. With the intersection of AI, the intersection of tech, and the intersection of literature, we have an opportunity to really do something different. I want to walk into a virtual world, go to the library, pull a book off the shelf, open the book up, lay it on the floor, and jump into the book. I mean, if we can do that, we can do anything, and we're really reaching that point. But there's so much more that we can do. I mean, we're down to 4 minutes here, and I think I could talk about this all day, but there's things that we need, and Edward and I have spent some time talking about the things that we need in this space. So how about I give up the mic for a second?
Well, so this is where I close with the call for action, because everybody on stage that you see is a writer, and we're good at creating poems and stories and things, but what we're not good at doing is coding. So we need some help from the developers. So if you're watching this, if you're live streaming this, if you're listening, or if you have a friend, here's some things that we need from the developers to take this to the next level. One thing is, if I take one of my literary NFTs, like my arts and poetry book, into Open Metaverse, yep, I can put it up on the wall, and it's a really lovely artist book cover. But you can't take the book, you can't interact with it. There's nothing you can do with it. You can't do what CD said and actually take it off. And if I have VR goggles on, I can't. So we just need that coded in there. OpenSea, the biggest marketplace that we have for general purpose NFTs, has no category for books.
Boo.
Boo, yes, bad. So OpenSea, engineers, devs, if you're in here, can the devs do something?
Call it literary.
Literary, well, yes,
Call it
literary.
literary.
Well, you know, it's a good question, but there should be, maybe I don't want literary. I want books, or maybe I want poetry. Maybe I want graphic novels. We should probably have something more than just art and but anyway. So that's another issue, though, is marketplaces. So there's a bunch of organizations out there. The last year, the big thing that I saw was organizations trying to create the marketplace. All the books published by us in one little store. Okay, that's not, when I go to Barnes & Noble, it's not the Simon & Schuster bookstore. Yep, there's books by Simon & Schuster and by Random House and by the Big Five and by the university presses, but I don't go to the supermarket to get a book. There are a few there, some romance novels, there's some magazines. That's not where I go. I go to a bookstore. We need a bookstore in Web 3. We've had people talk about something we don't have, which is a library. Maybe I can't afford to buy the new Harry Potter, but I'd really like to read it. It could change my life. And if only I had a NFT library card that I could get for free from my government or my university or my town, or it could be airdropped to me by Cosmo, I could go check out the new Harry Potter for free and read it in my little tiny place in Nigeria with the last few bars of my smartphone, and I will learn something from it, and I'll become the next big writer. So that's something we could use. Rating systems and reviews. There's no New York Times reviews for NFT books. That was actually the reason I bought originally. That was my end game in getting Project One. I was like, nobody else has Neil Strauss's book. I can be the guy who owns a copy, and I can write the review of it. So that's a rating system, because we saw this as anybody who was around in writing when Amazon released KDP, when anybody can write a book, anybody will write a book, and having gone through some professional writing courses, even in Harvard's writing program, there are still people who need a lot of editing on their work. I read for the Harvard Review. There are people who have really good writing credentials who send in things that's like, just can't say yes to this. So we need a lot of the things in Web3 that we already have in the traditional world, like literary agents and editors and translators. And again, they should get a much better deal because with the collaboration, they're not getting that fixed rate, they're now getting a piece of the pie. So that's my call to action. What are you guys excited about? Last really quick round.
I'll just say, if you're a writer, if you're a publisher, if you're someone who is doing something creative, the whole point of Vagabond Magazine, it isn't to make money. It's to give voice to creatives. We want creatives' work to be seen. And especially if you're working in Web3, if you're working in these ideas of community, we want your work to be seen. So reach out to me, reach out to Rionna, and we would love to publish your work, to share your work. We have this concept called...
Our time is up.
Oh.
Unfortunately,
Okay.
that's our concept
And that's
here. Thank you so much for your talk.
Say hi. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
So as somebody who's personally pioneering Web3 education, this was really enlightening and I think super